What's up? Happy Thursday. We'll bring that on the screen in a second. What's going on, guys? This is Rob. This is the Nocturnal Knockout, a Brass Ring Media podcast right here on our YouTube channel. And it's been happening more and more on Thursdays for the last couple of weeks. But for those of you that are new to wondering why you're getting this notification, if you're checking it out, maybe you're on RVD's Twitter and you're wondering why this Rob is talking to you. What's up, Fernando? Well, mostly every Thursday. Used to be Wednesdays. I don't know if we've had an official change on that yet, but on most every Thursdays, I like to sit down with you guys for about an hour, chop it up about wrestling, chop it up about some other topics. And we like to keep it a little informal. We like to relax a little bit and just get in what we got to do. What's up, guys? I like to see the chat is active right away. I don't even got to do my big old plug on the chat. We got Fernando saying, what's up? Zach is noting that it's Rice Krispie Treats days. Rice Krispie Treats, that's a top tier snack, in my opinion. Like that's an elite level snack. What's up, Sean? Yeah, we do, Sean. We absolutely do. I feel bad that we never closed that loop. And that's a real bummer that Thursday is what that is. But I'm glad to see you back in the chat. I was thinking about you about a week ago. Thinking how we hadn't talked to you in a while. What's up, Derek? I wish your football prediction last week would have come true in terms of entertainment value, because even though that game was technically close with the Commanders and the Packers, there was nothing close about that game. Speaking of games where there's going to be nothing close happening, I'm going to take you right till the epic showdown between the Dolphins and Bills tonight. I think you could tell by my outfit what team I'm rooting for. We're going to get killed. I seen there was a 12 point spread on the game tonight, and it should be much larger if we're being honest. Like it should be an absolute demolition tonight, but we'll see. That's why they play the game, right? And I figure, you know what? My team, especially my guy Tua, he tends to like do historically crazy things on these nationally televised games. So let's see what happens. Yeah, Tua hasn't looked great so far, but you're deep. Yeah, there was a point in the middle of the game last week, Sean, where at one point Miami hadn't stopped anyone and they hadn't scored. Like it was like breaking news that they forced a punt. And it happened like the middle of the second quarter against New England, against the juggernaut that is this year's Patriots team. My God. Yeah, I gotta look. I really just should do a sports podcast, because I think that's the thing we can generate the most discussion with. It's like I feel like sometimes my show might just be like, has the pretense of a wrestling podcast, and I trick everyone and we turn it into a sports podcast. I want to know though, what are you guys doing on Saturday? You guys have yourself a full day? I was thinking about it a few weeks ago when all this was announced, and I was all in on this Saturday. Remember, I let them fight, and then we had the time change. We had AEW blinking and lowering the price on their show for HBO Max subscribers, but also they adjusted the start time. And so we don't get a true pay-per-view war as I wanted. With that said, instead of getting a pay-per-view war, you might think this is more convenient as a viewer in that you basically get, depending on how long Tony goes with his show, we know Tony likes to go kind of long with some of these shows, you may get to see most of the matches as they air on Saturday, which by my very scientific Wikipedia research, there are 5 matches announced for Wrestlepalooza. What's up, Maria? And there are only 13 for Tony. Only 13 matches. I'm actually shocked that there's so few matches on the AEW card. So, and what we're going to do, and what I've decided that we are going to spend our time up until the epic showdown between Buffalo and Miami, is I want to go ahead and just kind of sort of tier rank every wrestling match that's going to happen between those two shows. I think there's more wrestling than that. We have wrestling on Friday. There's going to be more wrestling than that, but I want to focus on those two major shows. Let me catch up on the chat real quick, and then we'll get into it. Take a few sips of water. Derek says Mike McDaniel was the new Wonder King, but and I loved having like the smartest coach in the room for those like 8 months. Those 70 points on Denver and that comeback against Baltimore. That hashtag never forget. Split screens. Oh, I missed that, Marty. I didn't even see that. That's smart. Yeah, you know what? That's a good point, and that's a good way to kind of start us out. I'll highlight Maria's chat there that AEW announced the pay-per-view on the same day as Saudi Mania next year. Again, I didn't see that, but my suspicion has been, and the announcement was pretty fresh last week when we talked about, but as has been implied, I think AEW or there's going to be an American presence of a wrestling weekend, which I don't think is the worst thing in the world. Obviously, it's not going to have, I don't think, the success level that you got with the WrestleMania event, because less people are going to actually travel to see these other ancillary events as like their reason for traveling. But I think they still can do well on a weekend where people are still generally just focused on wrestling. I do think it would be pretty rich, though, if WWE ends up putting all of their ancillary shows back in the States. So just WrestleMania itself airs from Saudi Arabia, but they do like a bunch of side shows and NXT. And I've seen some things that maybe TNA is going to be running a big show like on behalf of WWE that weekend. So maybe my desire for a war is still going to happen, but it's going to be a little bit delayed. And then Derek had a really good comment here where he said, AEW is the Cheesecake Factory menu. Too much on the card. Yeah, I don't know if that's a bigger criticism of AEW or Cheesecake Factory. Like, Cheesecake Factory's got good food. But what Derek is saying is absolutely relevant. You're picking up like a book. And it's hard because, like, other than the cheesecake, which comes after the meal, you're trying to think, like, what is this place known for? What do I get from here? And they have pretty much everything you could want. But when there's everything you can want, you don't really like that choice necessarily. It doesn't feel like defined enough. I think there's no theme. There's no through line. And sometimes that can happen with these AEW shows where they have so much on them. I think the length that so many matches puts on you is something. But another analogy I'll give outside of the Cheesecake Factory is this was probably when am I forgot my train of thought. I had a really, really good point to bring out, a really cool analogy. Oh, I know what it is. And it's always about music with me, but I went to a cool show about a year ago, maybe. Heck, it might have been even longer. It was like, no, yeah, it definitely was longer. It was March of 2024. Great show for me. The Descendants and the Circle Jerks, just two awesome old school California punk bands that I could just I would go see them every night if they came. With that said, when the Circle Jerk set was playing, they had by the nature of punk rock, you have very short songs, and they had played basically so many songs, and you knew there was so much set time left, where the whole crowd felt like they were good, and not necessarily that they weren't into the band or they were tired. It's just like you had so much intensity and so much going on, so many songs in a row, like it kind of felt like it could be end times already. Like we could be done with it. And I think that's what AEW does on their pay-per-views, is like you might like all the individual parts that you have on these pay-per-views, but it doesn't always add up to the most enjoyable experience because you're having too much of it at once. Derek says Tony Khan should be working on a spring event for 2027 for WrestleMania season. We don't know if Raw, SmackDown, Hall of Fame will be inside. I thought Raw and SmackDown were announced for Saudi, but I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. I'm not following that story with the closest of details just yet. I was following Bret Hart and Goldberg being booked on the same show, which give me that. We're going to be breaking that down, right? We're going to have to do a play-by-play. We need an on-site correspondent. We got to interview Goldberg ahead of time. We have to interview Bret ahead of time. What a show that's going to be. So let's get to it, though, guys. Let's take these 23 matches. What's up, Adam? And let's put them in a bit of a ranking. Now, I have a few production issues, so I had to pivot here. All day, I knew I was going to do this, but I was racking my brain about how to like get 23 matches where it's legible for you guys onto a computer screen or a phone and make it look okay in the official like tier maker website. And it wasn't until like about 5 minutes before the show where I realized I could just have like two little tiny faces and that could represent each match, and that would have been fine. I just didn't think of it enough time to actually make the graphics. So instead, I pivoted, and this was my pivot that I did this week. I went ahead and kind of made, like, when you're a kid and maybe your parents can't afford something that you really, really wanted, but they kind of come up with it for you, and it's not as good, and they know it's not as good, but everyone's kind of appreciative, or you're kind of sour about it, and you're like that crappy kid who's like really mad at your parents for doing their best. I did something similar. I kind of created my own tier list on a Google Doc for us to just go ahead and make it our own unique kind of tier list. But being that I did figure out a workaround for this, and if you guys are into this kind of tier listy kind of content, we will use the actual tier list, the tier maker website going forward. It just it was what it was. Thanks for the shout out on the Dolphins gear, Adam. Might be the only thing Dolphins look good on tonight is me rocking the gear. That might be the only good look they have of the evening. All right, so let's put this thing on here. So here is my very makeshift tier list here. So we're gonna have to deal with this. You're gonna have to get over a literal Google Doc that is hovering over us. So it's gonna look like I'm creating a presentation, which is kind of what I do with you guys every week. I'm using Google Slides. I think I'm trying to learn how to use office equipment, trying to be a professional, trying to be a grown up here, and just using this show and you guys as the audience to do that. So if you look at this, though, I got this standard rankings. It didn't come up with any catchy names, any catchy tiers. S through D, we know what those are. We've been on the internet long enough. And thanks to a little copy and paste job from the good old Wikipedia, I have our 18 matches. And there's not 10 matches for WWE. So I think in order to do this correctly, we'll just sort of pick at random matches and we'll figure out what tier we want to put them in. And we obviously reserve the right to move these into other tiers when we realize that things don't quite look right. So let's go randomly. Let's get started. Let's go with Cody Rhodes and Drew McIntyre. I'm of two minds with Cody and Drew. On the one hand, I think there's a very high likelihood this is one of like the top tier matches of the weekend in terms of belt to belt action. Even though it'll be presented as this violent, knockdown, drag out brawl, it'll be long, it'll be a little slow, it'll be a little old school in that way. It'll contrast to probably what we see on the AEW card. There might be even a bit of a lame contrast. And who knows if they're going to be able to go all out, no pun intended, based on what else is on the card. Fernando has this match as his number 2. I'm pretty in alignment with you because I think this is likely to be a highlight of the weekend. I'm not necessarily putting it number 1, but I am putting that match as an S tier match. So we have Cody and Drew as our first S tier match. Let's go ahead and take that off of the board so I can stay organized here. Goodbye, Cody and Drew. You got to end it in double DQ? Probably. There's almost no chance we get a finish in that one, especially with the crowd and all. I said that. Where the hell is Wrestlepalooza? Why was I thinking it's not an international show? What am I thinking of? It is in Indianapolis. Okay, where they're being Peyton Manning and Reggie Miller country. All right, let's take something out of the AEW hat. Let's go with Darby versus Moxley in a coffin match. This is interesting to me because a few months ago, before we had the big Hangman coronation, you guys were going all in, not just you guys, but so the internet was all in on Darby being the one to end the whole Death Rider storyline, for him to be like the ultimate culminating guy. That was not the case. Hangman got hot when he did. Mount Everest played a role into things, but you knew they're going to have a match at some point. It's going to be an issue that is dealt with. And of course, a coffin match is just a coffin match with Moxley and Darby is a recipe just for violence. Violence. I don't know that it'll be necessarily very good. It'll be a hell of a spectacle, though. I'm going to put it as a B tier. Wrestlepalooza in India. See, the name Wrestlepalooza, I was, it's going to be somewhere in like the Northeast or something like that, I was thinking. Just based off of, my biases there. Okay. Io Sky versus Stephanie Vaquer. How are we feeling about this one? In some ways, this match has been built for months and months and months with false finishes and all of this stuff going on. I think we're just ready for it to happen. For it to happen properly, you had the title match for Stephanie delayed because of the injuries we had last month. These two do seem to have great chemistry. Io has really good chemistry with everyone. And if it plays out in match order, the way it's listed here on the card, I think it'll be one of the more well-received matches of the night. I'm going to go A tier on it. I don't know if you guys agree with that, disagree, but I'm going A tier. All right, let's take that one off the board. Let's go back into AEW. We'll do a few in AEW so we can keep it a little more even because there's a lot more AEW matches. The Cheesecake Factory of Wrestling. I like that line, Derek. I'm gonna steal that. I like that. Okay. Daniel Garcia versus Shibata on the pre-show. What do you guys think? Shibata versus Garcia on the pre-show. First of all, think of how early in the day this is going to be. Is anyone watching the pre-show with all the wrestling we got going on Saturday? Are you taking the time with the pre-show? I'm not. I'll be honest with you. I'm not. I'm not doing a post-show, but if I were, I wouldn't necessarily be talking about it on here. I'm gonna put that D tier just because all the Daniel Garcia storylines are a bit mind numbing and I don't really care about them. These are two obviously really good wrestlers, but I just don't care much about this. So our first D tier, Garcia versus Shibata. It could, Derek. Okay, let's just clear the pre-show right here. So, an 8-woman tornado tailgate brawl. Who are those 8 women, you ask? Harley Cameron, Mina Shirakawa, Queen Aminata, Willow Nightingale, Megan Bain, Penelope Ford, the Triangle of Madness, which includes Julia Hart and Sky Blue. This, I think, will just be a total cluster because you have 8 women in a tag team brawl. There could be some fun moments for sure. There could be some sloppiness. There could be some injuries. And I think we have this many people in a match. I'm not too keen on it though. And I'm also going to put this as a D tier match. I guess I need a little bit of distinction there for you guys to see that. And then we'll do one more pre-show match here. The last pre-show match. My God. Tony really taking advantage of that pre-show audience. What three? I wonder though, we complain about the lack of matches sometimes on WWE cards in the modern era because they seem like they're so shallow with the amount of matches that they put on. I wonder if they still had pre-show matches, if our brains would code that a little bit differently. It's just food for thought. All right. And then we have the Ops versus the Workhorsemen. So Joe and Hobbs versus Henry and JD Drake. You know, I'm going to say if this is the main event of the pre-show, it deserves to be. I like it. I like everyone involved in this. Big fan of the Ops. Big fan. I mean, how big of a fan can anyone really be of the Ops? But I do approve of the Ops, I should say. So but I'm also going to put that. I'm going to say that could be a C tier match. That's bold. I get it. It's bold, but I'm going to go C tier on that. All right. All right. Let's get into another WWE match. Let's go with the Usos versus the Vision. Look, I have no doubts about it. The whole point of this match is for the Vision to actually get a victory over something or someone, right? For them actually to do something and to be like relevant. They have to beat some kind of Samoans somewhere. And we know you ain't beating Roman. We got to have something to do with you. I think they're probably in there to beat the Usos. Now, I like all the pieces here. The Usos, Bronson Reed, Braun Breaker should be a good match. This match, though, does feel like it's caught up and worn down with this Vision storyline, which just not clicking all the way with me. It's got elements. It has things I like, but as far as something that's really cooking, I'm going to say no on that. This, to me, although I do think it'll be a very good match, I'm going to put it as a C tier. Although Jay turning heel, if that does happen, Fernando, I think would be noteworthy enough to rank it quite a bit higher. Cool. Only 2 more WWE matches to go. Let's dig into the Cheesecake Factory. Mercedes versus Rio. Like the founding member of the AEW's women's division versus now one of the absolute stalwarts. This, I got to be honest, in comparison to some of the other Mercedes matches, feels a little light on its side compared to what she's been involved with some of the other pay-per-views. I know she was basically doing the multi-person role on the last pay-per-view. Forbidden Door is a little bit of a different kind of show. This kind of feels like that as well, though. I still have scar tissue from Riho's initial run. So because of the prominence of a Mercedes match and what that can be, I'm going to put it C tier, but it just barely hangs on. So Mercedes versus Rio lands C tier for me. Maria's got a lower tier. Maria doesn't seem too keen on that match. Is that true? I mean, I believe you, Derek, but that's an amazing stat there. Derek, no, the last time the Usos wrestled in a traditional tag team match, just a regular 2-on-2 with tags on a PLE, was 2023 Money in the Bank, the Bloodline Civil War against Solo and Roman. That's wild. That's the card where we all realized that Dom could actually wrestle. It's a long time ago, and that's where Roman lost, so to speak, within his run, right? All right, let's go back into AEW. What else do we got? Let me take Mercedes versus Rio off the board. Let me take Darby versus. All right, let's just go with what's on my screen next. MJF and Mark Briscoe. This has been building for a really, really long time. We've had talkie talks. We've had Jay being brought up a number of times. It's going to be good. It's going to be violent. It's probably going to be pretty slow moving at points too. I don't know if I've got B as my violent tier, but I'm gonna put it in the B tier. Lots of violence in the two matches I have in that B tier right now. Let's make the screen a little bit bigger. There we go. It's a little bit easier for you guys to see. All right. The Hurt Syndicate versus Ricochet and the Gates of Agony. Bishop Khan and Toloa. It's a trios match. Lashley, Shelton, and MVP. MVP is like the one little bit of a weak link there. It's going to be good. It's going to be fun. My only concern with it would be where it goes on the card. That match reeks of an AEW match where you're tired and you're getting another beer or something like that. That's what that match spells out to me. Could be a really good TV match. I'm in agreement with you, Vadia. I'm putting it C tier. That's right where it goes. Yeah, he was pretty slow and rusty a couple of years ago in WWE when he would get into the ring. I think people do forget about how much older he was in his initial run too. He wasn't like 23 whenever in like 2007 when he was doing that. So we're putting that C tier. Glad you guys are playing along with the tier ranking, despite the fact that it's not a true tier ranking like this. But production upgrades coming soon, people. All right, let's take one more out of AEW, and then we can go back to some of these WWE matches. We only have 2 left, and they're the 2 big ones. Okay, let's get to the other big women's match on the card. Timeless Toni Storm versus Jamie Hayter versus Chris Statlander versus Tekla. This was kind of the position I felt like Mercedes was in last month, the one that Tony's in here. Kind of a placeholder, but also the feud of Jamie Hayter is something that still felt like it was on the mind. Chris Statlander, people can get into her. Tekla is kind of on the rise, I would say, as well. This is good and solid. It doesn't have the Tony Storm quality of build to it like we have become used to. Um, See, I'm taking Radia's B kind of seriously here because I was inclined to put it in C tier. But when I look at those matches in C tier, they have a lot more flaws in them than this match. So I will go B tier with this one as well. All right. That takes care of that one. All right. Let's do this really quickly. Big Bill versus Eddie Kingston. Don't even ask me what the build is to this. I could kind of tell you, but not really. I'm gonna put Big Bill and Eddie. I'm gonna say they're gonna be respectable B tier, but this match is a good example of just having too many matches on this card. So respectable D tier is where I'm putting them. There's no way to put respectable on there, but that's where I'm putting it. All right, that one's knocked out. Now, 4-way ladder match for the AEW World Tag Team Championship. Another match guaranteed with injuries, guaranteed to yield rants from old timers who are watching the business. You have Brodito, Brody King and Bandito. Love that team. The Young Bucks, the re-wealthed Young Bucks. Jet Speed, Kevin Knight and Speedball Mike Bailey. And the Don Callis family, Hechicero and Josh Alexander. It's definitely in that middle range, Derek. Out of context, I think this could be a B tier match. I really do. I think it does fall to where you're saying in C tier, probably a little bit more accurately, because I just don't know how well it's going to be received on the card. That's a match that I think is completely going to be reliant on its placement. Maybe, you know what? You guys might disagree with me. I'm going to make it a B. I'm going to put that. No, I'm going C tier. I just couldn't. When I looked at what else I have there, I just couldn't. All right, now we're getting to it. Now we're cooking. Now we're almost through. Even doing this exercise, though, I just cannot believe how many matches are just on these cards. Okay. Okada, Takeshita, and Dorada. Takeshita obviously coming off his big G1 win. That's still relatively fresh. Okada seemingly being set up for a big singles run, I think, early next year for the Unified Championship. The Okada matches kind of are hit and miss in AEW. But it's like an important match. It's a match that matters. I'm going to say B tier. Plus, it'll be really good if I don't know if they could really pull it off as a Okada. I know he's probably has been in triple threats in the past, but I just kind of can't recall him. So I wonder how that's going to play out. Okay, are we down? Are we now 2-2? Yes. All right. Our final four here. Hey, Derek, even when they book traditional tag matches, it's not like, they actually enforce tag rules in any of their matches. Not that WWE really does either. Kind of no one does, but it's a good point, though, Derek. Really good point. let's start with Cena and Lesnar. It's been a weird build for a couple of months on this. You had the Logan Paul match in between. We had the appearance by Lesnar at the end of SummerSlam. WWE seems to be going back and forth of whether or not they're actually promoting Lesnar or not. So there's all of that sort of in the way with Lesnar. When you put that to the side, you have to wonder though, can this actually be a quality match? Now, Lesnar and Cena have had great chemistry in the past. They've had some really good matches. They had their match back in 2003 at Backlash. That was very good. In my opinion, one of the coolest WWE matches ever was Brock Lesnar's big return match in 2012 against John Cena. And when they've met other times, I would like the triple threat that they had with Seth Rollins, they do have pretty good chemistry together. At the same time, these are two guys that are looking real close at the age of 50 pretty soon. And it's not like Brock Lesnar is Mr. Effort out there. Also, despite the fact that Cena is now a better wrestler because he's a babyface, I don't know if this is going to be any good, because I don't think Brock Lesnar is the kind of wrestler you carry to a really good match. So I'm putting this at the top of the C tier. This even goes above what I was talking about before, where we had respectable C tier. This is obviously the biggest match you could have in a C tier, but I'm going to say it fits kind of comfortably in there. Obviously, it's very notable, but I say it's very notable. How notable is it going to be? How long is the Brock Lesnar match actually going to last? Especially when it's against a declining John Cena. It's going to be a lot of spectacle. Could also be very tired. I feel like we will all be very tired. Like our rating of this the night of will probably be much worse than it actually was or actually deserved to be in the moments. All right. 3 more. And then we can get on to the greatest Thursday night football game of all time. Thanks, Bezos. All right. Oh, that's interesting. So Derek thinks that it's going to kick off the card, which that's probably the way to book it. Put the AJ and Punk match at the end, because that's, to me, like a more intriguing match in that way. And if you're going to make it really short with a lot of energy, yeah, put it towards the top of the card. Muddy is not a fan of this match. All right. And it's weird because you have all these things that, like, Lesnar's included in the video game, is this and that. I can't put my finger on it. Like, is Lesnar really going to be around, or did they just kind of do like, The Rock at Elimination Chamber, where you just had to sort of have him around for this one show? I don't know. All right. Another match that has been built for a really long time and had kind of a peak with their promos this weekend. Adam Copeland and Christian Cage taking on FTR in Canada. So Aura alone, this match is going to be loud for this match. It's going to be a lot of crowd involvement, a lot of singing of songs. It's going to make Zach really mad with all the singing that they're doing. You've got a C tier, Maria. I'm going to give it a little bit more than that. I'm going to say, because of the atmosphere and environment, I'm going to put it as a B tier. I mean, I did look for a couple of weeks when the whole storyline on Dynamite was Copeland having Stokely beat up. I could watch that on TV all day long. Oh, I didn't even see that. See, I've been really busy at work the last couple of days, so I'm not as much in the know of things. So I didn't know that is it kicking out the pay-per-view that way? Like, Brock can get back to Canada in a reasonable enough time. Is that what's going on here? Is it like a WrestleMania 35 situation? All right. Fernando, that could apply to like 4 different matches on these 2 cards. What you just said there with everyone in this match is old. I'm rating it much higher than you guys, though. I did see that. Okay. Last WWE match. What most of the programming on the Raw side of things has been based around the return of AJ Lee and this feud with Punk and Rollins in its next form, where now the wives are involved. But in this case, the wives can kind of outshine the husbands, if we're honest, in the last few months. Obviously, everyone was so into AJ Lee's return. That was really well received. They kind of reset things. They did things like again. I thought it was a little bit repetitive last Monday from where they were at. There's a lot of intrigue with the return of AJ. There's not a lot of intrigue with the feud between Punk and Seth. Like, I am so done with that. And that's my issue with Raw. It's the boring Punk and Seth show and it still is. Even if, as they've added these new elements to it, it still sort of hits that. Let me look at. I'm gonna look at what it's around to make my judgment here. I kind of think it could be A tier. AJ Lee's gonna be rusty, and I'm not so sure she was ever the greatest wrestler in the first place. As I don't think a lot of people agree with me on that take. I think she was very popular. I think she meant a lot to people. I don't know. I think sometimes that's been conflated, though, with her being a great wrestler. Not to say she's a bad wrestler. I just don't think she was ever really given those opportunities. With that said, I'm going to bump this up a little bit to an A tier. Just the star power involved. I think the way it's going to play out, it's going to be well done. It's going to have moments that you invest in. I'm going to put it there. All right. And finally, take that one off. And you go away, Cope and Christian. It's an interesting point you said about continuing storylines, Derek. I think there are times when it works, and then there's other times where it's like the fans of whatever show you're watching just have to do way too much homework, and like you said, Edge and Christian, that's very much a WWE thing more so than anywhere else. Those are WWE things. All right, and finally, Adam Page versus Kyle Fletcher. Hangman versus Kyle Fletcher. So I've got this in our top 2 tiers. I'm a big Kyle Fletcher guy. And this wasn't always the case until I went to a Dynamite a few months ago and I just saw Kyle Fletcher in person. I like turned into like Vince. I was just that guy needs the title. Like, that guy always needs the title. Just by one look at him. And yes, he's big, but like there's a lot of big guys on the show, but there's just something about him that just stood out to me and really blew me away. And Hangman, I like Hangman better, I'll be honest with you, as the guy who chases. I just think that role works out a little bit better for Hangman, but I think it's been fine as champ. I would like maybe some other stuff, a little more interesting thing for him to do. So you know what? I'm gonna go S tier with this. The only thing that I think will, and I'm putting it behind Cody and Drew. I got Cody and Drew, I think, as my top match of the weekend. The only thing that gives me hesitance is like where we're receiving it on the card. If it's truly, the main event, the last thing that goes on, We just talked about 12 other matches. People are going to be a little exhausted and have a lot of wrestling ahead of them. So I can see that hurting it. In terms of a real moment for Hangman to like really become the champion, and I wouldn't say carry the guy. That's way too disrespectful to Kyle Fletcher, but he is newer in that spot. And to see if Hangman can really be that guy on there. And that does close out an almost perfect timing, our makeshift tier rankings. So I have it up on the screen. Let's look at it. At the bottom, and I know you guys disagreed with some of this. Feel free to start your own stream, make your own tier list, and disagree with me. Or disagree with me in the chat, because that's what I really like. In my D tier, I've got Big Bill and Eddie Kingston, Daniel Garcia and Shibata, Harley Cameron, Mina Kawa, Queen Abinata, Willow Nightingale, Megan Bain, Penelope Ford, and the Triangle of Madness. In my C tier, Cena Lesnar, the Ops versus the Workhorsemen, the Usos versus the Vision, Mercedes versus Rio, the Hurt Syndicate versus Ricochet, and the Gates of Agony, Bro Dito versus the Young Bucks versus Jet Speed versus the Don Callis family. That's my C tier. My B tier, Darby versus Mox, Briscoe versus MJF, Tony Storm versus Jamie Hayter versus Chris Statlander versus Tekla, the triple threat with Dorada, Takeshita, and Okada. And then Copeland, Cage, and Copeland and Cage versus FTR. In my A tier, I've got 2 matches in each of the top tiers, and I do think, like anything, these could have been in. I think these you guys probably would have put some other things maybe in the top tier. I think you guys probably would have advocated for Briscoe and MJF and Darby versus Moxley, which to me those are right at the top of where I've got them. But in my A tier, I've got Punk and AJ versus Seth and Becky, Io versus Stephanie, Vicaire, not McMahon. Hangman Adam Page versus Kyle Fletcher is in my S tier, and then Cody versus Drew. And I do have Cody versus Drew as my quote unquote match of the weekend. So the last thing I want to leave you guys with, and we have about 4 minutes before I get on out of here and start pre-gaming. It's gotta be a rough one tonight. Jeez. No chasers on these tonight. Just straight up water. Or early morning tomorrow. No drinking tonight. Plus, the depression that can set in whenever Tua's head inevitably falls off tonight. What do you guys think, though? When you look at all this density of matches, it's hard to really compare these 2 cards because there's so much more on the AEW show. But I will say, I don't necessarily think either company put their best foot forward for this. This is, I think, kind of a typical September pay-per-view that we're doing here. I do think the higher end of WWE might be a little bit better, but there's a lot less in the middle, and the chance for the WWE shows the show to be a total bummer and a downer and to just feel like such a come down, I think that very much exists. If I had to predict who's going to win the weekend, I don't know. I think WWE will have a better show sort of top to bottom because there'll be less fat on there. I think there'll be more cool things on the AEW show. I think there'll be more noteworthy and newsworthy things on the AEW show, as long as it doesn't just get swallowed in the density of it all. So Derek wants a little more build. I think from your both of what you put there, you want a little more invested into Kyle Fletcher before he's in this spot. I do view this though as kind of like a one-off. And one of those like, oh, not quite yet, and he's just getting a taste of it. Whereas I think you could have put a little bit more into that. I really do. Fernando's got AEW winning the weekend. I think they will definitely have what they always tend to do. Or not always, but occasionally they tend to have more goodwill at the end of their pay-per-view weekends, and I think that's going to be the case. Unless there's a big backstage brawl and a crazy press conference and all that, then all bets are off. I don't know about you guys, But I really, really liked doing this kind of cliche internet tier ranking kind of stuff. I had a lot of fun with that. I would like for the production of it to be a little bit better, obviously going forward, but I kind of liked doing that. I think we'll do some stuff with that format. Kind of fits the whole streaming vibe. I think we'll do some of that from here on out. I also haven't made the official ask, so to speak, to move the show to Thursdays, but it just keeps working for my availability. So I would say tentatively, I will plan on taking you into Thursday Night Football each week, but you never know how the wind blows. You never know what busyness looks like. You never know about anything, right? Everything in the world is uncertain. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows if I even make it to tomorrow? I might, that might just be my last memory. Will be, Bills 57, Dolphins 14, and then I don't know. My house turns into a sinkhole or something because that's what I needed to cap off that day. All good points there, Derek. Really, really good points on the different constructions of the company. Let me put your TNA Impact. Yes, can never forget Impact. Thanks, Maria, for keeping me honest on that one. All right, guys, this was a little bit of a shorter show because I've got a football game to cry over here in a little bit, so I got to do some things to set up. So I want a few things for you guys. I want you guys all to have a good evening and hopefully and pray for my football results. I want you guys to have a blast on Saturday. What I expect next week is for us to be telling our split screen stories, our wild food stories, our I started drinking since the pre-show stories, and I put my friend through a table in the living room stories. We need all of those to come out next week, and we'll talk again. You guys have a great evening. We will see you all next week, hopefully.